this academic year. Thanks, everyone. I realize some of the folks aren't here today because apparently COVID is still happening. So I appreciate those of you who are here, and I'm told this is streaming live, whatever that means. So hi to the rest of the world, I suppose. We'll begin with some enrollment figures, as we do every year at this time. So the enrollment outlook, right now the College of Criminal Justice is down 223 majors. This is as of yesterday. Yesterday is important because it is the infamous 12th day of classes, so that's the census day, and that will become relevant a little bit later on. But the numbers that we have here are the numbers that we will be living with for the next 2 years worth of legislative appropriations. That is down 5.5% from where we were at this time last year, and perhaps it's worth remembering that at this time last year we were down from where we were the previous year. Those majors that we don't have are not taking some 2,202 semester credit hours, so our semester credit hours taken by our majors is down 4.75%. Now, there's two different ways they calculate semester credit hours. One is the one I just described. Those are the number of semester credit hours criminal justice majors take anywhere on campus, regardless of the college. The other way that we calculate that is the number of semester credit hours we produce as a college. If there was going to be good news anywhere, that's where we would want to have it, because that's where our allocation funding comes from, because these are the courses that we have to teach. For us, the semester credit hours show to be up 1.53%. There are only 2 colleges that are in the black with regard to semester credit hour production. We are one of them. Now, truth be told, we are probably at 4% growth, which would put us at the highest of any college on campus. This is a little bit complicated, but we have launched the Premium Distance Learning Program, which means we have students who are currently taking 5A, 5B, and 5C, which has never been counted before. We also have students who will be taking 7B. We did have 7B last year, but looking at the comparison between last year's 7B and this year's 7B, because those numbers aren't in the big fall numbers, we are down a total of 24 semester credit hours. But in the 5-week parts of term, we are up 660 semester credit hours. So the net result is that the college will have experienced 4% growth in semester credit hour delivery for the fall, which, as I said, is good news. And if any of the numbers were to be up, those are the ones that we would want to be. So one obvious question we have is, why do we have the loss in majors? Don't know. Have some suspicions, though. A few years ago, we actually used to have our very own advising center here in the College of Criminal Justice. And when there were conversations about centralizing that function, one of the concerns that I had expressed to the folks up the hill is that we then lose our capacity to target particular high schools and community colleges that are known feeders to our programs. We target them for a couple of reasons. First of all, they deliver us a whole lot of students. But second of all, they're demographically the composition of students that we want to attract the most to our programs, and we'll be talking about that a little bit more as we go along. So I threatened back then and said, if you take our advising center away in about 3 or 4 years, you'll see the corresponding decrease in numbers, and here we are. But I know, don't want to fall victim to the post hoc propter hoc fallacy. Could be just a big coincidence, right? I don't know. But that's one of the likely suspects that I have on my list. Another one is that our students are particularly financially fragile, and we'll look at the numbers here in just a minute. But we are disproportionately Hispanic, more than any other college on campus is. We're also disproportionately first generation. And from what we know from the literature, that probably means that those students are especially vulnerable to economic forces that we have underway right now in a couple of ways. One of them is that they probably don't have the resources readily available to go to college. The other, though, is that we have a fairly robust labor market right now, and it could be that the incentive of fairly well-paying jobs is enough to drive some people into the workforce as opposed to coming to college. So these are a couple of the reasons that I think we may be experiencing that. The other one, which I have on my list of things to fix this semester, is simply the zeitgeist. There's a lot going on in the criminal justice field that ain't so pretty right now. Think about George Floyd and Eric Garner and Breonna Taylor, the incidents that occurred recently in Uvalde. It may be the case that students who otherwise might have been drawn to this field and the study of criminal justice may not be so inclined at this point. Those are some of the things that we'll be taking into account as we look at marketing strategies and other ways of trying to boost our enrollments. Our numbers overall, over time, look pretty good. This is a fairly familiar graphic that we have. It shows the number of CJ degrees that we've conferred. In this case, it goes all the way back to, I think, 2014. I've darkened one of the lines for you. They weren't very visible, but that is the 1,000 degree mark. So last year, we surpassed that significantly with 1,069 degrees. The previous year, we had dropped just below. I think we were at about 996. The year before that, we had exceeded it as well. You will hear in our enrollment numbers that we admitted the largest freshman class in our history. That's something that we brag about, and it's on today at SAM. What we're not so proud of is that our transfer students have dropped precipitously, and that's what's pulling them down. I mention that because since we have admitted such a large class of freshmen, that means that in a few years we should see those numbers continue to go up, hopefully even faster. Another one that, thanks to Lori, was updated as of yesterday, so I appreciate this one. This graph depicts all of the various colleges and universities in the state of Texas that confer the bachelor's degree. And yes, if we weren't that blue line shooting up, we wouldn't be looking at the graphic. A couple of years ago, I was concerned because we had that little downturn, and I didn't know what that might mean for us, but we can see that appears to have been a blip. I was also concerned about 5 years ago that there were some folks catching up with us, but that seems no longer to be the case. The pie chart that you see on there shows our relative proportion of those bachelor's degrees awarded as of last year, the 2020-2021 academic year, and we are holding steady at fully 25% of all bachelor's degrees in the state, notwithstanding the fact that there are some 25 other institutions conferring those degrees. So we are holding our own quite nicely. The semester credit hour production, as I mentioned a moment ago, is the coin of the realm. We can look and see how that's been doing over time. Last year was our second highest rate of semester credit hour production, only surpassed by the previous year, which was an especially good year. So we're holding steady and improving as time goes on. This one you can't read, and I know Randy loves that, so we have a blown up version that will allow you to see that of the college enrollments, criminal justice is way ahead of the pack with 7,326, followed closely by science and engineering technology with 7,034. Most colleges have around 5,000 students, so we are definitely something of an outlier. The other way that we tend to look at this is with regard to top departments by enrollments. That's the middle one, and then top majors by departments or by enrollments. Again, we'll go to the Randy size big one here. We can see on here that the Department of Victim Studies is number 22 out of 41. A few years ago, when we were looking at forming the Victim Studies Department, the projections were that if we did surface that department, it would be right in the middle of the pack. Now, that doesn't look like the middle, but that's because this only depicts the top majors. There are many more majors than are listed on here. So Victim Studies is looking good at, again, 22 out of 41. Security Studies is not far behind at 29 out of 41. I think this is pretty remarkable because y'all have had an undergraduate program for like, what, 15 minutes, Nadav? What is this, like the third year? So to have these kinds of numbers, to have this number of majors, I think is pretty impressive. And speaking of majors, the graphic on the right shows Victim Studies at number 28 and Security Studies at number 29 out of the 76 majors that we have on campus. So Again, with all of our programs, we are looking pretty good. Department by department, we see that criminal justice and criminology is held pretty steady. For those of you who may be wondering, this does not include, none of these numbers include the various victim studies programs. They have been partialed out of this. So this is just the various CJ programs that we've always offered and continue to offer. Forensic science is a little bit landlocked because historically, and up to this point, they don't really have an undergraduate major. And with limited resources, there's really only so much they can grow, especially since graduate coursework is particularly labor intensive. So you will notice, though, that the proportion of doctoral students relative to master students has generally grown over time. What forensic science does have is a minor. And some years ago, in conversation with the various department chairs, we acknowledged that CJ Crim was supporting some of the other programs, and that was something that we needed to resolve, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we discuss departmental priorities. But we decided at that time to move toward establishing a more solid financial base each of the other departments. And as you can see, a minor is all they have to work with, but they're doing pretty well, having tripled the number of minors that they have. One other thing that we're working with them to do is to roll this minor out in our distance learning program. And every reason to think that it will be very well attended, and those numbers should go up fairly dramatically. In security studies, as I mentioned, they've only had a bachelor's degree program we're now in the 4th year. It got off a pretty slow start, but I think we got the program approved like a few days before we could start to register. So probably to not even count that first 77, but you can see the growth. About a third, 100% of the first year increase in each subsequent year, and we think that one will continue to grow. We haven't even reached the 4-year mark where it would be fully populated, but the security studies courses were among the first ones to roll out in the distance learning program. So we think that one will go up as well. Victim studies, we see what those programs have done. Again, there's been a pretty good increase over time from a little over 100 to right at 300. Looking more closely at the growth, the demographics, if you look at the far left, you will see Hispanic and Latino students, and the blue line, random by apparently, is Hispanic women. You can see Hispanic women are the fastest growing of our student population right now. You'll notice that the men tend to be dropping off in just about every demographic group. Black and African American women to be holding pretty steady. Women tend to be on the increase, but not nearly as much as the Hispanic women. We can see the gross and semester credit hour production by college. This one is hard to see what the growth looks like. There is a gray line in there that depicts the College of Criminal Justice, but another graph that I think shows that a little bit better. Again, that's us in the gray. And we can see that over the last 5 years, we have grown the fastest of any college on campus with 2. One of them has to be business. Who's the other one? Arts and media, I think, losing, but you just lost a little bit. Business lost a lot. So we're certainly in a good position relative to what all the other colleges are doing at the moment. This graph depicts our proportion of generation students top. Again, CJ is the gray line. At the bottom, Hispanic and Latino students. Again, you can see that not only did we lead the institution, but we led the institution by quite a bit. Let me look at her. Yeah, so the The number that the others are trying to creep towards is 25%, and 25 is the threshold for us to be designated as a Hispanic serving institution. The numbers were collected, the snapshot was taken in the fall of 2020, and at that time, there was only one college that had reached the threshold, DJ. The other colleges were all below the 25% criterion, but we were so far ahead that we were able to pull the rest of the institution across the wire. So we'll talk in just a moment about college priorities, but before we do that, since it looks like we're about as newly assembled as we may be, I think this would be a good time to introduce our new faculty and staff members that we have, who I think are supposed to be populating the first couple of rows here. Beginning with the new faculty, starting in the Department of Criminology with Jared DeMello. Laura Aishu. Okay. Elizabeth Hartzell. And no judgment for people who aren't here. I just walked through the auditorium and Peter Lehman is teaching. So we like it when people teach classes. That's a good thing. Bitna Kim. Alex Kinney is one of those that is teaching. Wanda Leal. Danielle. Javier. Okay. In the Department of Victim Studies, we are joined this by Philip Mulvey. Now, for the staff, and they're not like brand new, but joined us in the last. In the Dean's office, we have Chavaria. In the Department of Criminology, Joe Horn. And Luke Putman. In the Department of Science, we have Donna Page. In the Correctional Management Institute, Matthew Bills. That name sounds familiar for some reason. Vanessa Farmer. In the Law Enforcement Management Institute, Angelica Bermudez. Ty Hyde. Aaron Parr. In the Institute for Homeland Security, we have the Executive Director, Mike Asplund. Robert Crane, busy protecting the world. Jodrick Daniels. Cindy Martinez. Scott. Shelby Payne. Dave Stender. John Suarez. And Grant Threet. Student Recruitment and Engagement, Amanda Johnson. Web and Media Director, Perry Miller. Communications Director, Kim Foster. Premium Distance Learning Project Manager, Rose Cater. And the Institute for Forensic Research, Kelly Lyons, who is unable to attend and I think no relation. Also, this is to announce faculty tenure and promotion decisions. In this case, we have Madeline Swartwood, who was promoted to Associate Professor granted tenure in the Department of Forensic Science. We also acknowledged a week ago some service awards, 20 years to Kelsey Bryant in forensic science. Years for Sam Craig in Leamet. Rita Watkins from Leamet was unable to attend today, but was recognized for 25 years service to Sam. Doris Pratt with 30 years. And McCall, 35. Started here the year I was born, Deborah. Also, we were fortunate this year to the university's Staff Excellence Award recipient, Sharice Herm, the correctional manager. All right, with the enrollment numbers out of the way and our of new exempt faculty and staff, we'll turn to college priorities. As you know, we've been working on the premium distance learning program for a while, and to thank everyone for donations and ask for more. This is a very complicated. I mentioned our 5A, 5B, and 5C parts of term. Those didn't exist until like 2 weeks ago. And so it's many moving parts. Other that we're working through right now include things like eligibility for financial aid for students who aren't going to be taking a full load 10 weeks into the semester. So there are a lot of issues that we're working through. As I looked at what was delivered, I was a little bit terrified because it was supposed to be available in February, and it was going to be available in March, and then I think a week before class started, we got to my boxes packed and everything just in case, but it turned out to be pretty good. My guess is I would probably premium distance learning program a B- at this point, and the distance between the B- and A is mostly on our end. I think there are things we could do at our end to improve this, but SHSU Online did a really good job of putting together what we had sought. I thank Janet Mullings for shepherding this process through. More than once, there was one or another office on campus that said this could not possibly be done by the fall. We know Janet, and they got it done by the fall, which is exactly why she was in that role. When I last looked, the average class of the distance learning courses was 23. Through a communication glitch, I think the suite of courses hasn't really been yet. So the fact that we're halfway to where we wanted to, about $1 worth of marketing expended, I think is a pretty good sign. We're also going to be looking this year at a number of changes in the building. Those of you who have been here for a while know we've already seen some changes in the building, but I think that is going to continue, maybe even on steroids over the course of the next year or two. The first big bit of news at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice has already identified a home outside of our building. And in a moment, we'll look at the building and you can see the difference that that's going to make. The other thing is, some of you may have heard that the Crimes Project was being sold. It was. Now we're not sure. We're hitting the pause button. We have a new chief financial officer for the institution, and she started literally a week. So the good news is that she is from SAM, Amanda Withers, so she's already familiar with our operations. But we're going to be having some discussions not only with the crimes folks, and those discussions have already started, but we're also going to be looking at ways in which this project might align better with the direction that the Criminal Justice Center is going in the future. Not that there's some radically new direction that we're going in, but we're starting to look a little bit more closely at crime analytic tools. The more and more we go in that direction, the more and more the Crimes Project aligns with that. So I mentioned a moment ago that we'll take a look at the building to see how this is out. So you probably recognize the view. Most of you are probably most familiar with the faculty offices on this side of inverted U. But if you look at the building, you'll see that it's kind of an image, right? And in fact, on the other side of the U, it is potentially similarly configured. So who lives there now, you might ask? Well, on this floor, we currently have dormitories that I don't think are really fit for human habitation right now. Not occupied very often, and when they are, it doesn't help very much. The floor below that is currently occupied by one of the divisions of TDCJ. I think it's their risk management division, but I'm not completely sure. The things that we have right now are that when TDCJ vacates their portion of the building, we will rehab all of that, configure it in ways that are best suited to meet the needs of the studies department that will be located on the bottom floor. The Institute for Homeland Security will be co-located with them so that we have the academic and center functions together. This floor will have the Department of Victim Studies along with the Crime Victims Institute again so that we can advantage of some synergy academic and professional development side of the house. We've been talking about this for a long time, but it looks like it may be finally happening. I'm told they will be this December, so I'm thinking maybe May of 25. I don't know what that. They are moving with remarkable speed given how long they've been here and how long we've been trying to make that not be the case. I believe dating back to at least the dean who hired me, they've been trying to recapture this space for academic purposes. Our programs have grown considerably. We are already of office space for faculty, and this will alleviate that burden quite. Now, one of the downsides to this is that once that is available for academic use, students going in and out all day long, faculty going in and out all day long, the ingress and egress may not work very well. So we may be looking at doing something with this area inside the U. Specifically, we're having conversations about building some stairways along with accessibility that will allow access to the balcony here or on the floor below, and also trying to figure out how to get access to the other side, to the left of the white arrow. Currently that area is used sort of as a loading dock. It's not big enough for big trucks to get in there, but we will be looking at ways that we can rehab that space so that we can maximize the interior space. The other thing, the master plan for the institution has us going back to two-way traffic. As you may know, there's almost a full loop that goes all the way around campus. It probably starts over here at the hotel and then goes up to here, and then it gets lost at the HKC, and then you end up in the Jolly Fox parking lot. That was the original master plan, and so they're working on fixing that and making it a real loop. The other thing that they're wanting to do is to delineate clearly the boundary so that when you get to Sam Houston State, it's clear that you're on ours. So if the case and the master plan comes to fruition and that becomes your thoroughfare, then obviously we will have that part of the building facing most of the traffic. So we'd probably end up with two fronts of the building when it's all over with. For the vast majority of you who weren't here back then, the Gatner Performing Arts Center used to be the parking lot where criminal justice students would park to come to class. I personally think that that was a better use of the space, but the Arts and Media Dean disagrees. So now that the parking areas are on the other side, it really does make sense for us to have something approximating a front of the building in what is currently the back. Other priorities. Weeks or so ago, the deans and the department chairs met to determine departmental priorities. as you know, we'll talk about in a minute, we have a big strategic planning process underway for the entire institution, and eventually that means we have to propagate that down to the level and the department level. So we've begun to have conversations with chairs and department leadership about what they want going forward. What should we be aspiring to? The Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology, not surprisingly, is unwavering in its ambitions. They want infrastructure. They want us to strengthen what we've already got. So that's things like more faculty to deliver actions that we have, because we have the highest faculty semester credit hour of production, and we shouldn't. So we need more faculty to strengthen the programs that we've already got. We need more students to accommodate the more faculty, as well as the parts of our mission that graduate students. We also need to make sure that we have adequate resources available for professional conference travel and those kinds of things. So rather than some brand new direction, Criminal Justice and Criminology articulated its concern as making sure that what we got is strengthened so that it can be maintained going forward. Forensic Science has a brand new department chair, and I would thank Sarah for her dutiful service these many years, the only chair of that department up to this point, and would Cherie taking her place, but Cherie is in Australia, and Sarah, I guess, is attending to the Queen. She's in England now, so. But in conversation with Cherie, her goal is simply to facilitate that transition, to work with faculty and get a better sense of what their priorities are and what they want to in the term. Both the Victim Studies and the Department of Security Studies articulated the same concern, which is to build research-based degrees in each of those departments. So we would be looking at a Master of Arts probably in each of them with a thesis requirement and potentially a PhD. Now, it's a little intimidating because there are no PhDs in victimology and there are no PhDs in security studies. Having said that, when this college first PhD, there were practically no PhDs in criminal justice or either. So it is definitely going to be a steep climb. There's going to be work that needs to be done in order to get there. Much of that goes back to some of the numbers that we looked at before, to make sure that we have a solid financial base to support these programs going forward. And trust me, the folks up the hill bless this unless they had a high level of confidence that we had in place a plan to make that work. As I advance proposals like this up the hill, my goal is always to promise low and deliver high, or threaten high and deliver low, right? So as we look at what we expect to bring in, I'm very conservative in those estimates so that we don't get ourselves in trouble for overdoing ourselves. And when it comes to calculating costs, I'm going to be pretty liberal in that because we, again, don't caught unawares by that. So you'll hear conversations about those programs going forward. I will let you know that usually this is a very slow on-ramp, literally years in the making. I think the next step for us probably will be, as many of you know, we have a consulting firm kind of on Hanover Research, which works for us on one project at a time. I think some of the next projects we ask them to tackle will be to do the market study about the viability and demand for those programs. And then we'll go from there. I think the coordinating board have like 3 years advance notice anyway. So we're going to move in that direction. We'll take those first tentative steps, see where to go based on what happens at each level. We also are going to be constituting an Office of Distance Engagement. One of the questions that was posed as we looked expand our distance learning programs is, should each department have its own little unit, or should we have one operation centralized within the college that handles all of it? And ultimately, we went with the second, in consultation with the department chairs. For one thing, the big expansion would impose a very substantial burden on the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology because of the sheer number of students. It's a lot of faculty to evaluate, a lot more students to deal with. The other thing is that we do have students taking coursework across all programs, and there are students who move from one program to another. So we think that centralizing that operation probably makes the most sense. In addition to the DL components, the office would also undertake centralized scheduling as a whole. As many of you know, we spent a couple of years transitioning to a centralized scheduling model. We did that once. We're not going to do that anymore. So we're going to transition back to the one we had before. But we believe it makes sense to coordinate that at the college level. And I've had some conversations about this a long time ago when it came time to schedule courses. Deborah and Karen Caldwell, Rosa Koss, and Cuddy, I think, would all lock themselves in a classroom and spend, Doris was there too, spend a few days, post-it notes and whiteboards and whatever, figuring out what the schedule should be. And eventually what emerged was kind of a 2-year cycle. So in the fall of year one, we delivered this. In the spring of year one, we delivered that. In fall two, we did the other one. And then we did the final one in the spring of the second year. And then we repeated the whole thing all over again. I think we'll probably go back to a model that looks a lot like that, because then we can just tweak a little bit along the way. The other thing is, I would imagine there will be some liaison between that program and the departmental faculty as we look to make sure that that all of the courses can be delivered. So in our early conversations about this distance learning initiative, I'd said that the entire operation was not going to be handed over exclusively to our professors of practice. That continues to be the case. And as I also mentioned in one of our earlier meetings, there will come a point soon where we ask faculty if they want to develop their own highly sized courses in this format that they can themselves. And in conversation with Bill, for example, he has agreed that if faculty members do that, and it makes sense to do a particular course, that the commitment would be made that the faculty member will do that course for a number of years, I think 2 or 3 years going forward. But in order to alleviate that burden from the departments, we would have this distance engagement office handle that. The final thing, I think, is that they would also handle professional certificates that we're going to be working on. The courses we have developed will ultimately be stripped away of some of the application exercises and critical thinking exercises and comprehensive assessments, and we'll be left with content and quizzes. And the quizzes will be aggregated in order for us to deliver professional certificates. This is consistent with the coordinating board's 60 by 30 TX plan. It's also the direction that we're moving in higher education more generally. Having said that, as soon as we deliver those certificates, we're going to try and induce them to sign academic of that. So we will build a bridge to academic course credit. I don't know what exactly that looks like, but I do know that there is one of the task forces that's been convened as part of the strategic plan is exploring that right now to figure out how we can confer that credit. The other priority is Jesusorg. Mike Asplin has graciously agreed to take on East in his shop. I think that makes sense because one of the things that cjtexas.org will do is serve as the repository and the touch point for the certificate programs. I think, and you'll see our list of certificates here shortly, the certificate programs overall are going to be pretty homeland security least early on. So I think the work that he does designing and the website and populating that with content makes some sense. Also, as I mentioned, the university's strategic plan is something we continue to pursue over the course of at least the next year. There are 4 strategic priorities. I think there are 277 people working on 25 different task forces, working to make sense of that in concrete ways that are accessible to our students and faculty. Other priorities that we have, one area of attention is going to be kind of cleanup and compliance. I mentioned how we used to schedule classes. I can't remember who got stuck with the task, but back in the days, someone would also get course syllabi and have to go through them word for word to make sure the holiday policy was in there and the font was the correct size and all that stuff. Well, we got away from that. Unfortunately, in the ensuing year, kind of got away from some of the requirements as well. So we're going to be taking a look at the course syllabi to make sure that the course descriptions with the catalog descriptions of the courses, make sure that the learning objectives are also consistent with that. We're also going to take a look at the various landing pages that we have. Apparently, these youngsters nowadays, when they look for stuff, they put it in a search engine and they click a button and it lands to a certain place. I used to go to the web and search around until I could find it. That's not apparently what we do now. But because that's how people access content these days, it's critically important to get these landing pages right. One of the areas we'll be paying particular attention to is the criteria that we list for those landing pages. A few months ago, we had some major policy revisions that rolled out from academic affairs, specifically the faculty evaluation system, the promotion and tenure policy, and the peer review policies. And because they rolled out at the institution, we now have to figure out what that looks like at the department level, right? What is a 4 in security studies? What's a 5 in victim studies? Those criteria have to be determined and laid out. Things I'll share with you is that as an institution, we're moving away from the old FES model, which was kind of, we take a snapshot of your performance right now and figure out how much money you get for that, right? That was kind of the traditional way that we had done things. We're now moving in a direction of faculty professional development. We will see incremental changes over time that involve us spending time working with faculty to find out what their professional development priorities are and how well they're making progress toward those things. So a few years ago, you may recall, I was asking for DIPTACs to give us something more than just a vote. Because when tenure decisions are made, I'm supposed to exercise my own independent professional judgment, as is every department chair. Well, if all I have is a ratio from a vote, I got nothing to work on, right? So we began to ask to get discussion so that we can get a sense of what was covered, what issues were raised, what issues weren't raised, and that also will feed into the ongoing conversations that department chairs have in the first couple of years and DIPTACs have in subsequent years. But as we ask for more fine-grained information, that's really what this is in the service of, is it's trying to get what we need so we can move in this direction of professional development. Also going to be continuing our efforts at curriculum mapping. Through this process, we're able to learn just what it is to teach our students and what we're not teaching them that maybe we ought to teach them. We're going to start this with the distance learning courses because conveniently all of the micro learning objectives are already spelled out. So they learn. We'll then be taking a look at our face-to-face classes and try to ensure we're covering what our students need in order to be successful. And expand. So We now have a diversity officer. At the institutional level, we have had our own diversity, equity, and inclusion director at the college level, and so we're trying to figure out how to kind of marry those two functions. On the one hand, we want to be very much in alignment with what's happening at the institutional level. On the other hand, we're not really going to wait. We have things to do, and usually a timeline is a little bit more aggressive for a variety of reasons than the institutional timeline is. But we will be looking to see what those priorities are going forward. Now, as I mentioned, the Chief Diversity Officer, it's probably worth noting that we are currently experiencing what the organizational literature refers to as a high level of organizational churn at the top. At the senior vice president level, for right now, the vice president for student services is open. The university advancement vice president search is in progress. The finance and operations vice president has been in office for a week. The academic affairs vice president has been in office for a year. And there is no IT vice president anymore, but IT has recently been moved under Heather Thielman in enrollment and strategic initiatives. So there's a lot going on the Hill at the highest level. Other chiefs that have turned over recently, our Chief Marketing Officer search is currently underway. The diversity officer, as I mentioned, has been here for less than 6 months, and our Chief Strategy Officer has been here for about a year. At the dean's level, within the last 2 or 3 years, we have had a turnover in the health sciences, the business dean, and the osteopathic medicine dean. So there's a lot of stuff up there, and as that stuff happens, I want to assure all of you it's not happening here. We are maintaining the course. We know what we're doing. We are on a solid trajectory. I can assure you we have the support of the president and the provost and the chief officer. In fact, General Glazer is in our building several times a week these, but that is as it's supposed to be. When decisions get made up the hill, faculty, staff, and students are largely to be insulated from that. So as you see those things happen, I wouldn't worry about them. It means that we're going to have to do a little bit of extra work to try and make sure that our efforts align with it. But I'm pretty confident that that we're where we need to be. We don't have to be concerned about. We'll also be looking at how to transition into our newly acquired status as a Hispanic serving institution. I'm sitting on the task force for that effort. Also, we're figuring out what to do about our R2 status. And I remind you that R2 doesn't mean suddenly start doing something new. R2 is an acknowledgement of what we've already been doing, right? It is a certification that there. So this R2 doesn't really need to worry anybody about a sudden change in direction. However, with R2 status, there are certain expectations, and those expectations include a high level of doctoral research productivity. So things that we've been working on, and this is part of the infrastructure that Bill has been for some time, is a 2-2 workload for those faculty members who are involved in the very labor-intensive work of mentoring the research efforts of our PhD students. The institution is not going to a 2-2 workload. This is not something that is going to be applied to every college. In fact, it's not even going to be applied to every department within any college, and not every faculty within any department. The process will involve a case-by-case determination as to whether or not a particular faculty is engaged in that very labor-intensive work of mentoring. And I'll share with you a couple of things that helped push this thing over the finish line. Bill and his team and Danielle did a very good job of making the case, including about how many students we had graduate and attain faculty positions at R1 institutions. Got people's attention. And they realized that just happened with investing huge effort into those students. On the forensic side, there was an external review that was done, and in that external review, made it crystal clear that the load that science faculty were assuming was in light of the intensity of the nature of the science that they do. So at present, we are looking at those two exams. We will have a process for having the chairs nominate faculty members. I think we'll actually invite the faculty to nominate themselves and submit that to the chair. Criteria will be laid out that will operationalize what exactly this thing looks like, and then faculty can look at that, whether they think that they fit those criteria. If so, make a recommendation to the chair. That then comes to me, and ultimately will have to be blessed by the provost. Nor I strongly encourage to leave the provost alone, but you can feel free to thank him if you have the opportunity to do that. That accomplishes two things. One, the usual stuff that happens when you thank people for helping you out, but the other one is make sure that we're on the same page and we all know that this is now a thing, that this is an expectation that we have going forward. So we will be communicating more about that workload policy going forward. And again, hats off to the leadership and Danielle for pulling together what will make this thing happen. There's also a research task force we're establishing at the college level, and I believe we have already identified the people on that task force. Maybe we've even contacted them. But as we settle into this R2 status, we want to make sure that the processes and the procedures that we have in place are as streamlined as possible. So if there are best practices that we can borrow from other institutions, if there are rabbit holes we consistently fall down that we can somehow fill, we want to identify those things so that we can come up with a better product. Also, we have our usual panoply of college committees, but a couple of newcomers to them. One is the BTO committee will be dealing with two new awards. The first time this one is the David Houston Outstanding Adjunct Professor Award. David Houston was a sergeant with the Houston Police Department, worked for us as an adjunct for a few years, was much beloved by the students, and passed away from cancer about 3 or 4 months ago. And we were kind of with comments from students, and it drew my attention to just how highly important our adjuncts are to the overall mission of the institution. And incidentally, this is something that we're worried about up the hill more broadly. Somebody noticed that we've been paying our adjuncts $3,000 a course for like 1,000 years. Maybe there's a better way to do that, and I just found out from Bill that a task force or a committee has been put together to look at that, ways that we might incentivize and provide merit. But because adjuncts do more than half of our curriculum, it, I think, is important for us to contribution and in particular to single out those adjunct faculty members who are doing an especially good job. A little bit about budgeting, because it's that time of year and this will be familiar to many, but we've been in the new budget for 7 days now, and already we have requests that are coming in that probably should have come in like a year ago so that we could weigh those. But just as a reminder, we do go through a 5-year budgeting process. And as you might imagine, the first year is pretty clear. We have a really good sense of what that's going to look like, unless there's a pandemic or something that surprises us. The second year is a little bit, but we still have a pretty good handle on that. By the time we get to year 3, we're not sure, right? It's there, not terribly clear. Year 4 bears some to what we end, and year 5 is not terribly. The way these requests flow is we start at the departmental or unit level. Department chairs or unit administrators will somehow pull together all of the requests, and then the department chairs or unit administrators will balance those requests, assessing one priority against another, and then we'll look to recommendations at the college level. And then we will do the same thing. We typically meet with the department chairs, meet with those unit administrators. We decide what the priorities are going to be. That then goes to academic affairs. Now, the good news is academic affairs most of the money, like the overwhelming majority of money. So it's better to be in academic affairs than some of the other divisions. But that also means there are a lot of priorities that have to be balanced. So when academic affairs finishes with its balancing, it's then submitted to the president and then ultimately makes its way to the legislature. And then it rolls back downhill in a good way once those allocations are made. We do this through what's referred to as initiative budget request. Again, the department chairs and folks at the organizational unit level will identify these priorities. I think going forward, we will have to identify what university strategic priority our new initiative budget requests align with. And some of you may be familiar with that because that's kind of how we did things about 7 years ago. What do you want and how does it mission? But this example, I can't read it, but that's okay. In any given year, history that we usually get about $300,000 funded. So in this particular year, which I think was a couple of years ago, we figured we were going to get funded down to that blue line right there. In fact, we were funded down to the red line, right? But as I said, we go through a 5-year budget process. So once number 1 and number 2 are off the list, then number 3 becomes number 1 for the next year. And we just continue to work our way down there. Now, sometimes something weird happens, something breaks that requires us to depart from the plan. But as a general matter, we stick with the plan. It shows that we know what we're doing and the concerns and issues that we raise are valid. In fact, there were a few times I thought they caught us up the hill. They said, well, last year you requested this and not even on here, and you were like throwing a fit saying that this was absolutely important and you had to have it or it would be the end of the world. Where did it go? Well, we funded ourselves because it really was that. And we do have some tools at disposal to help facilitate that. This is a look at the we typically rely on to various aspects of operations, but we have a number of different sources here. A couple of relate to the fees that we charge. Many years ago, the restrictions on higher education were lifted. We were deregulated, and we were allowed to charge student tuition. In the past, we had gotten to fund that. But once the cat was out of the bag, designated tuition became a major source of income, like that right from the students, and we spend it here at the institution. Another big source of funding is so-called formula funding. As I mentioned earlier, today was counting day, right? At least for the fall, off day in the spring, in the summer. It was last summer. But what we do is we submit to the coordinating board what those enrollment figures are, and then they have a formula. They fund according to the number of semester credit hours that we produce. Graduate coursework is funded at a higher level than undergraduate coursework. Natural sciences are funded at a higher level than humanities. There is a formula, and that formula is used to bring a whole lot of money here on campus. Some other sources of funds that we rely on, and when you submit initiative requests, we'll look to some of these other sources to offset expenses. Distance learning fees. We have a few more degrees of freedom with DL funds than some of the other types of funds, so sometimes we'll look at whether a particular initiative can be funded through distance learning fees. Also, the IT funds have their own pot of money to fund some things, so sometimes we'll look to see if we can pass cost on to them. Then finally, there are so-called HEAF funds, higher education assistance. These are restricted. They are generally for capital expenses only, and we were told for many years that they had to be spent in the year that they were awarded, but we found out a couple weeks ago maybe that's not the case. So there may be some more flexibility that we have with those funds than we did. I mention this, though, to say that sometimes we might be able to fund something, funds, even though other sources of might. So when we say we can't fund something and then you find some glowing billboard outside, it costs $1 million a month to rent, money that funded that thing. The temporal sequence formula function is that we start with this snapshot, again, the census date for the summer preceding the fall of the counting year, census date for the fall and the census spring. Then goes to the legislature and they award us our year allocation. The second year allocation is the same, so it takes years for those funds to catch up. But the bottom line, I think, as we go into the next year, we are doing from a position of relative strength. Of course, we're always upset when some of the numbers are in the red, but it's the numbers that are in. Moreover, if you look at the trajectory that we've had over the course of the last decade, I think we continue to be in a solid place, and I think going forward through strategig marketing, we should be able to grow still. I was looking at our career. I was reminded that exactly sure happened, but you see the ubiquitous orange cards here, each of which reflects a day in custody here, and that's what the typical day looks like. Actually, that's today, now that I think about it. But I did think that it might be useful to kind of reflect a little bit on where we are. And as I said, I don't want to be taking for stuff. I just happen to be here. I'm not the one that teaches the classes. I'm not the one that publishes the article. I don't serve on faculty search committees. So the things that we're talking about, the things that we've accomplished over the course of the last decade, are in the direct result of the hard work of departmental administration and in many instances associate deans. I mentioned this earlier, but we led the institution in Hispanic serving institution status, and a lot of that was a result of very targeted and focused efforts that we had in particular state. Sam Houston State, as I mentioned at the time, had a 24% Hispanic student population. Our 35%, however, was enough to pull us over the line, and it's also consistent with the fact that the face of Texas is changing, and we want to produce criminal justice professionals who represent the communities and ultimately go on to serve. So we're very pleased to see that change. We also have more programs than we did before. We now have a victim studies BS degree we didn't have before online. We also have security studies BS degrees online when we didn't have any bachelor's degrees beforehand. We have a number of certificates that I knew I wouldn't be able to read, but they include Certificate in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. At the undergraduate level, we have Certificate in Security and Resilience in the Chemical Energy sector, Security and Resilience in the Healthcare sector, Transport sector, and Resilience in the Biosecurity and Pandemic sectors. Up to our graduate certificates that we have in critical infrastructure protection and emergency management. We also have an undergraduate certificate in victim studies, and I think we will be continuing to develop more certificates going forward. We also have more departments. I remember the victim studies a few years ago, but that was a certain addition. We now have more faculty than we did. We have 20% more faculty now than we did 8 years ago. Was a 29% increase, or is a 29% increase as compared with an 18% increase in the number of majors that we have. So we've actually succeeded in growing our faculty faster than our students, but that's not necessarily something I try to sell up the hill. We also have a more diverse faculty than we did. The greater diversity of our faculty and team means that we can make better informed decisions because those decisions have perspectives that others might not have. Also, more representative of our students. We've increased the female tenure and tenure track faculty from 36% to 50%. We've doubled the number of Black and African American tenure and tenure track faculty members. We have, I think, doubled the LGBTQI tenured and tenure track faculty members, and tripled the number of Hispanic and Latinx faculty members. Now, this is to say that our work is done. We have plenty more to do, but I do think that we should applaud the leadership within the departments for doing the things necessary to bring us to this point. As always, as we move forward, our goal is going to be to impact faculty. We want to impact the composition of the faculty through making strategic hires so that we have a complement of faculty that is well fitted to not only deliver the curriculum, but also engage in the service activities for the field, research needs of the field. We also want to insist in those faculty members through professional development, high impact practices so that they can advance the interests of our students and the work that they do with them, provide faculty with the appropriate incentives to do their job as well as the resources necessary. The hope is that our faculty will impact the students then through quality in instruction and facilitating transformative experience, and those students in turn will impact the field by becoming competent and capable employees in the criminal system and informed policymakers. And our faculty will also impact the field directly through the high impact research we conduct. So I apologize for the long meeting. I did it wasn't going to be 20 minutes this time, but we have a lot to cover because we have a lot going on. So at this time, I'll open it up to any questions you may have, and ice cream. Warned. Frozen is a block intended to facilitate. All right, well, thank you, everyone, and I'll join. Oh, did we have one?